Hello, everyone. So let's talk about water pollution. So water pollution can come from a point source or something called non-point source. Here in this picture, you can see the point sources on this side and non-point sources on this side. So water pollution means any changes in the chemical, physical, or biological properties of water due to human activities. So many impacts on water are not visible. pH can change. We can't tell by looking at water. Nutrient concentration, dissolved oxygen. So they need to be monitored chemically. So what's a point source and what's a non-point source? Point source is a location, um, discrete location that releases water pollution. So we know that it's coming from this pipe. For example, here, sewage treatment plants. We know it's coming from this pipe. Whereas non-point source, it arises from multiple inputs over a large area, such as farms, city streets, and residential neighborhoods. This is a residential neighborhood. We do not know what the source of the pollution is, non-point source. So those are the two types. All right. So many types of toxic chemicals are released into water sources. We've been talking about this for, multiple times. We talked about these. So, um, nutrient pollution from fertilizers and other sources can cause issues. So pesticides can go into water, petroleum products, heavy metals like arsenic and lead and mercury. So in old pipes, lead can seep into water. Acid from acid precipitation, mining runoff, plastic debris. We talked about bottled water. So disease-causing organisms like bacteria and parasites can also enter drinking water from improperly treated sewage. And these toxins in water can disrupt um, human cause human health problems, can disrupt hormones. So it can cause lots of issues. So something called endocrine. Endocrine is a system in our body that is responsible for hormones. So these are called endocrine disruptors. Those are the chemicals that mimic the hormones that regulate our physiology and stimulate growth. So some pesticides, herbicides, industrial chemicals, they can enter the water from agriculture and they can act as endocrine disruptors. So they can have very negative impacts on our health. And then biological pollution by pathogens can cause human health issues as well. Nutrient pollution. So we've been talking about when the nutrients can seep into, can go into water from the fertilizers like phosphorus and nitrogen. And it can lead to something called eutrophication. That's when there's excess amount of nitrogen or phosphorus in the water. So what can that can do? It can increase the growth of algae. So it can go in from farms, golf courses, lawns, and sewage. And so it's a natural process, eutrophication. So nutrient inputs from all these things, it can cause the algae to grow excessively. And that's what it's gonna look like. When this happens, the organisms in the water get no oxygen. It kind of cuts off the oxygen supply, creates a dead zone of very low oxygen. And that can cause algae blooms and and it can impact biodiversity that's living in the water. When we are clear cutting, mining, and clearing land for development, we increase the rates of erosion, create sediment pollution. We transfer water for coolant in a factory or power plant, then returning the warm water creates a thermal pollution. So that's water's ability to hold dissolved oxygen decreases as temperature rises. So some of the aquatic organisms may not survive when human activities raise water temperature. And when we draw water from the river and use it to cool a power plant, we transfer heat from the facility back to the river where water is returned. So that's what can cause the um, temperature to raise or go up, temperature to rise. And if there's too little heat, that can also cause a problem. So if the water is colder, on the bottom than the surface. That can also cause issues for the species living in the water. So that might favor some species that like the cold, like invasive fish, whereas native species, they may not be adapted to that temperature, and that can cause issues. So, many pollutants that affect surface water also affect the groundwater, and groundwater pollution is difficult to detect, and pollutants may reside in groundwater longer. So, water pollution takes many forms. Human waste, animal manure, pulp from paper mills, and yard waste, all are considered biodegradable. These are also low oxygen levels in the water as the materials decompose. So these lower the oxygen levels in the water as the materials decompose. Wastewater is water affected by human activities. This includes water from toilets or sinks, dishwashers, and washing machines. So why groundwater pollution is difficult to detect or even treat. So pollutants may reside in groundwater longer than surface waters because groundwater is not exposed to sunlight. It has fewer microbes and minerals that hold less dissolved oxygen and organic matter than surface water, and pollutants decompose more slowly. For example, concentration of herbicide um, decline by half in 20 days in soil, but in groundwater, it takes almost 4 years. Chemicals that are toxic or at high concentration, for example, aluminum, fluoride, nitrates, those also occur naturally in groundwater, but groundwater pollution results from industrial, agriculture, and urban waste, such as heavy metals, petroleum products, that can leach through soil and seep into aquifers. So, for example, nitrate can do that. Nitrate in drinking water been linked to cancers, miscarriages, and blue baby syndrome. That's a condition where oxygen carrying capacity of infant blood is reduced. And over withdrawal of groundwater concentrates the pollutants that are present. The Clean Water Act of 1977 set standards for contaminant levels in surface waters and funded the construction of sewage treatment plants. So we treat our drinking water. We have, so before reaching the tap, water from the reservoir or aquifer is treated with chemicals to remove any particulate matter, filtered by sand, gravel, and charcoal, disinfected with chlorine, tested for levels of 90 contaminants based on the set standard by EPA. So how do we treat our water? So these pollutants are removed by physical, chemical, and biological means. So the water goes to a treatment facility. I hope you guys can see this picture. If not, this picture is also given in your textbook. So you can kind of zoom in on that. So at the treatment facility, large items are removed from the incoming water with screens. And then the wastewater is subject to primary treatment. This is primary treatment. So that's the water coming in, and then it goes through the primary treatment. And the primary treatment physically removes contaminants in settling tanks and then this process removes solids as well. And then it's gonna move on to secondary treatment. Here, aeration basin, so microbes are consuming organic matter. Then it goes through the secondary clarifier. There are many oils, greases, and solids are removed here. And then filtering happens. Um, so the clarified water is treated with chlorine and occasionally with UV light to kill any bacteria that remained in the water. And then the treated water is piped down the rivers after it's gone through the purification. So we treat our wastewater um, through all these different methods before it's, either receiving it through tap water or before it's returned to the rivers.